Hello, kia ora everybody. Welcome to our second webinar from our series. I'm excited to see everybody here today. I'm going to begin our hui with the karakia, and then I'm going to introduce our guest speaker, Jessie, and hand over to her. So, karakia tīmatanga. Whakatakati hau ki te uru, whakatakati hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei maureora. So I'm really excited to welcome Jessie Robertson, who will be talking to us today about two different pedagogical approaches which you might find useful. So maybe some of you are already using them: design thinking and problem-based learning. While you're listening to her presentation, you might want to have a think about how you could use these approaches in your teaching. And if we've got time at the end, we're planning to have a breakout group where you can get together in small groups, discuss your ideas about how you might use these approaches, and then share your ideas. So that would be, I'm looking forward to hearing your ideas about that. So Jessie was an intermediate teacher for 5 years before she started working at Te Papa, and she's really interested in innovative practice and digital tools. So I can't wait to hear what she's got to share with us today. Thank you, Jessie.
Cool. We'll spin it round. Kia ora, everybody. My name's Jessie Robertson. I'm a Learning Innovation Specialist here at Te Papa. Welcome to my webinar on project-based learning and design thinking. Now, you'll see down the bottom, I have a bit.ly, which is a link to these slides, which Mel's going to put into the chat for you guys right now so that you can join along. You're welcome to keep this bit.ly, refer back to it, make a copy of these slides. It's totally up to you. There's a few links in here that are really relevant. So I thought if I give you guys a copy of the slides, you can click on what you want. You can refer back to this when you need to. If you have any colleagues that aren't able to make it today, which I know a couple of people do, you can share it with them and everything. So feel free to take it on as what you would like. Awesome. So a little bit about me. Helen said a little bit, but yes, I was a teacher for 5 years before becoming a part of the Te Papa crew, and I've been here just a little over 4 years now, and it's been really, really cool. I've got to do a lot of amazing things. One of my main reasons of coming out of the classroom and into Te Papa was I really found that education was changing a lot when I was teaching, and I didn't feel like I had a lot of time to keep up with it. And so coming into this position at Te Papa, I felt I had a really good opportunity to start to keep up with what was happening, what was new. Te Papa had just started our brand new learning lab called Hinatori, and for them it was about 21st century teaching, seeing what was new, seeing what was exciting, and it would give me an opportunity to keep up with that research, understand more about what our learners need to participate in the future and to understand and to know, and then I could pass that knowledge back on to teachers who don't have the time or other educators. And so that's what I've kind of been doing for the last 2 years, is doing a lot of PLD, a lot of working with teachers, working with educators about what is out there, what is happening in our schools, and what we can do to be forward with that. And that's what I'd like to share with you today. So I'm really, really passionate about problem-based learning, project-based learning, design thinking, because for me, I think it really encompasses the way we learn now and the way our world learns and the way us as adults learn as well as children. So having this kind of idea, I think, is something we can start students with now, and then we can move through for the rest of it. That sounds like a dog, but it's not. Sorry if you guys can hear that. I don't know what it is, but it's not a dog. Okay, so let's move into it. So what is project-based learning? So like I said, it can also be known as problem-based learning, PBL. It can also be known as inquiry in classrooms. I hear a lot of teachers referring it to inquiry learning. You might have heard that as well. It's students gaining knowledge and skills by working on a single problem for an extended period of time. So it's having a problem, having an idea, and rather than having different ones for different subjects, it's often cross-curricular and involves many subjects. It's a problem that we're trying to solve that just weaves its way through multiple ideas and multiple problem-solving skills. Oftentimes they're community-focused problems so that the students feel like the work they're doing is meaningful and that it applies to them and it's something that they can see. And it also naturally integrates the key competencies from the New Zealand curriculum, which are, let's see if I can do this, thinking, relating to others, understanding language, symbols, and text. No, the last one is participation and communication. And the M, managing self. Yes. So as you can see, all those 5 skills would just naturally come into working on a project for a long period of time. So it's really cool in that way. So that's project-based learning. What is design thinking? So I've got a little bit of history here. Design thinking began in the 60s in an intent to scientize design. So a lot of design was happening, especially in architecture and stuff. And scientists kind of wanted to understand what that process was that you went through when you designed something. But then it was kind of like, well, design is design. You know, you go through a process. Do we really have the same process? And that was kind of the idea. And a lot of it went back and forth. It went through lots of different places, not just architecture. There was computer science. There was many, many different places that were looking at different ideas of design until about 1987 when Peter Rowe published his book Design Thinking, which was the first time it kind of came out as a thing, essentially. And that looked at the way architectural designers approached their tasks through inquiry. So from there, we had places like Ideate and Stanford Design School emerge where design thinking became a central goal for their teaching and learning. It was the way that they taught. So I put a little link down there so you guys can kind of see a little bit more. That's just really, really brief, but it's that idea of putting a structure to designing something. And we design in many different ways in many different places within our life. So it was whether that structure would go over these multiple different places. Do we design the same way here as we do here? So like I said, it's putting a structure to project-based learning. Design thinking is iterative, it's non-linear. So it can move back and forth between them. It's not just step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. The structure itself helps to link those subjects together. And it means that projects can be tailored to suit each individual learner and their way of thinking. So rather than telling somebody exactly what they need to do, so you need to do this, and then you're going to do this, and then you're going to do this. We're saying this is the problem that you're going to solve. This is the way you're going to solve it. And then for them, the way that they solve it can be tailored to what that means to them. So that sounds a little bit confusing. I'll show you what I mean. When I say structure, I use this structure. So the structure that I like to use is based from Stanford Design School. And this is what they use when they're designing anything. This is their central kind of goal, their central idea that they work around. So it starts with Empathise, then define, ideate, prototype, test. And I also put a little extra one on the end, although it's not in there, as share. And I've seen that done a lot with people putting share on the end, or I think it's present as well, it can be known as, because it's really important, especially when we're teaching students and kids, that they share these ideas and we give them an opportunity to present and understand and share with others. So I'm going to talk you guys through what each of those steps mean and what they might look like in the classroom so that you can just kind of get a sense of it. So starting with Empathise, what does it mean? It means that students are introduced to the problem and the audience that they're designing for. They use different mediums to help them empathize with the audience and gain interest in the project. So this is when the problem or the project is first kind of introduced to them. And of course, whenever we're starting with any project or any problem, we don't just jump into the solution. We need to understand it as much as we possibly can first. So what might this look like in the classroom? Might look like interviews with stakeholders, reading articles, viewing media, a lot of discussion, a lot of brainstorming, a lot of notes, ideas, posters, anything like that. As much as we can give them in the time that we have to empathize with this problem and with this idea. From there, we're going to define exactly what it is that we're solving. So by defining, we're going to use the information that they've found, define what the problem is that needs to be solved, and usually write a challenge statement so that we can have that up big, bold, so that when students are struggling or maybe thinking about different ways, they can look at that and go, okay, am I solving that problem? And it's something that the teacher or the educator can refer back to as well and say, that's really awesome. Are you solving that problem that we originally identified? So the way they can do that is they can come together in groups or class, have a discussion about what the problem is, compare with other groups, and then kind of come to a conclusion. So now that we've got the problem, we've got the idea, we know what we're doing, it's time to start ideating. So this is when we get those ideas out. So they begin to come up with solutions. So we've said what the problem is, we've said what we're trying to solve. Now we're going to come up with a lot of solutions. This is one of those times when we want to get a lot of thinking out there. We really want to push the students that no idea is wrong, everything is welcome. We really want them to be thinking outside the box as they possibly can. So this could look like quickfire brainstorming sessions in groups or in a class. I've put there thinkers keys, if you know thinkers keys. So that's little prompts about how to think. So that might be along the way of how might you solve this digitally? How might you solve this if you had 5 minutes? How might you solve this if you had all the money in the world? How might you solve this if you had all the time or the knowledge? What if you had all of those? Just ways that we can encourage them to really kind of think outside the box. I don't know if anyone's ever done some of those really cool quick fire brainstorming sessions, you know, when you put a fork down on the table and you say, okay, you've got 5 minutes to come up with 100 ideas that are things we can use a fork for. So they start with it while eating, brushing our hair, maybe digging in the garden, and things kind of get bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's really saying that no idea at this time is too silly. So once we've ideated, then we start to prototype. So this is where we start to narrow down those ideas and we go, okay, well, what can I actually achieve in the amount of time that I have? For this purpose now, I'm kind of talking about if we were to do this, like I said at the beginning, over a long period of time. So if you're in the classroom, you would kind of do this over a term, but we will get to how we would cover that in a smaller amount of time for people like us who don't spend a lot of time with their students. So yeah, this is where they start to think, okay, in the amount of time I have or the resources I have, what of these is viable? What of these can I do? So this is also where the students start to understand that this is an iterative process. So they might start to create a prototype and then think, I'm not going to get this done. I'm going to head back. I'm going to go back and look at what I've ideated and start again. So that's prototype. And then test, which I think they go really, really close together, prototype and test. This is where they start to seek feedback. So they create a prototype that they're trying the prototype that they've created to see if it does what it's intended and seeking feedback. So some of those people that we originally talked to when we were empathizing, some of those stakeholders, this is a really good time to go back and talk to them and say, hey, so this was the problem you came to us with, just as we would if we were in, the professional world and we were a cake designer or we were something like that where we had to design for people. We would go back and say, okay, based on what you gave me, this is what I've come up with. Give me some feedback. Let's how we go. And this is where it really gets iterative because they would test. They'll get that feedback from their peers, from their stakeholders, from the teacher, whoever, and then they'll go back to prototyping and then test, prototyping and test. It's the idea that you are never finished designing. You're never finished. It's always going. And ways that we can see that happen in real life is you look at something like the iPhone, for example. We have just had announced iPhone 13, and that's because there was a 12, there was 11, there was 10. They missed one of them. I think it was like a 9 or something. But still, it's different versions because they've prototyped and then they've tested, which is by putting it out to the audience. They've listened to feedback and then they've changed it. Often we find students will come to you and go, I finished. They haven't. And this is really showing them that, no, you finished, you're ready to test and get feedback. They're really, I feel like a lot of students we see are really used to having step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, done, finished. Can I go and do something else now? They're not used to receiving feedback on what they're doing, changing, staying on that same thing. And this is a really important process because, as we know, this is what we do in real life. This is how we produce things. We don't just say, okay, it's done now. We say, okay, here's where I'm at. Give me feedback. And then we get feedback from someone else and someone else. So it's really teaching them about that idea that you want it to work for what you want to do. You want to look back at that challenge statement and you want to say, are we getting to that? Are we fixing that? Or they might have created something that's brilliant and amazing, but it actually doesn't fit that challenge statement. And that was the whole point. And so the last one, like I said, I like to put in there share, because it's really important for us to share what we've done. And oftentimes students would have put in a lot of work at this point. So it gives them that opportunity to share that work and get, the feedback that they deserve for putting in this type of work. And a lot of them are really proud of their projects because they've put their own thought into it. They've worked really hard. It's something that's come out of their brains. And so sharing it's really, really good. So they could be sharing it with their peers and audience, the stakeholders. And what you really want them to share is the process that they've been through. Because like I said, it's an iterative process. None of them are really done at the end of it. They might have a pretty good prototype, but there's probably still people that they could go and talk to and gain feedback from. So we really want them to come up and go, okay, so here's what I did. Here's what I've been doing. They might have 5 complete failed prototypes. But they can tell you why they failed. They can tell you why the first one failed, what they changed for the next one, why that failed. And that learning, that's just as important as if they have one big thing at the end. We don't want to make it feel like there's a start and an end. We want them to know that having 5 failed models is just as good a learning. And I've said there that could look many different things: presentations, speech, videos, posters. I often will get my students to keep a log of what they did each day because that helps them to understand that process if we were doing it over days. So that's the design process. And now I know some of you guys are probably all thinking, okay, that sounds really cool. That sounds really great when it comes to classrooms. What a cool thing to do. But how does that work for us as museum and gallery educators? We don't spend a whole term with them all day, every day. We have small parts, or that's really great. So one of the cool things about us is that we have the opportunity to give them that authentic context. Our galleries and our museums are full of authentic context. It's essentially all they are. It's somebody responding to a problem or an idea, the way that they've done it. And so we get the opportunity to actually explore those. For a lot of us, they are local problems, which makes it even more authentic because they're things that students can see within their community, within the town, within the city. They can actually see the outcomes of that problem solving, of the way that someone has solved that. They might not agree with it. That's even better. We get to resolve the problem. It gives them opportunities to explore ideas in ways that work for them. And like I said, their museums are archives of designs, questions, answers, and problem solving. It gives students the opportunity to revisit some of these moments and make the decisions that were made, which gives power to their understanding. so they can go back in time and go, okay, this is there because this is the process someone went through. I didn't like it there, but actually now that I understand that process that they've been through, I see why it is, but here's how I would make it different. And I put down the bottom experiences, obviously, because that's what we can give them. We can actually put them. So rather than sitting in a classroom and hearing about that experience, we can be like, okay, here's where they were. Here's what they used. Here's the context at the time. Let's have a look at a couple of other things that were happening at that time. We have that perfect opportunity for that authentic experience to happen. So what might this look like as a museum program? So first up, this is how, so I'm kind of using the example. I have an example for you of a museum program that I have done that follows this, and it takes place over 2 hours. So this is what it would look like as a 2-hour program. Again, the way we all work is very, very different, but this is my example of how that might work in a small space. So starting with, when we empathize, we explore ideas related to a question or a problem. So community issues solved and explored within the museum, problems raised and explored within our collections, oftentimes in galleries. So many of our different collections are addressing a certain problem or a certain issue or something like that, and they are in response to something. So looking at what that big idea is and the way that person has responded as opposed to the way these students might respond, great, amazing. And the questions, we can also look at questions and problems students are exploring in class. So we often have them come to us because they're like, this is our unit topic this term, this is what we're looking at, and we've already said, yeah, we can help you out. So we can be looking a little further. Well, what are you actually solving? If they say, we're looking at rivers. Okay, well, what about rivers? You know, is it a whole thing on seaweed or is it a whole thing on water? There's so much that we can do. So what are these questions that you're trying to answer? And this is something we can talk to teachers about. Great that you want to know about rivers and lakes. That's awesome. But what about them? Because we could do a whole year on rivers and lakes. What are you trying to answer? What are the questions that you're asking? So after we've done that, we then set the task. So what are we trying to solve? What's the idea? And then we're able to provide different opportunities for students to engage with that problem and look for solutions. So I find that my ideating, my prototype, and my testing are all kind of within the same time. So some of those ways could be digital. They could be making movies, 3D models, storytelling, photography, annotation and photography. It could be drawing, painting, collage, could be using recycled materials to build things, all these different ways that we have. And then at the end, hopefully, fingers crossed, if you get time, opportunities to share with the class or others and to talk through the process that you went through. But sometimes you do find that the teachers are really, really into it and they want this to continue back in class. And so that can be a really good pointer to them is, okay, so if you want to keep doing this, that's great. It would be great if you could get to a point where the students could share where they're at. And then that kind of gives the teachers that next step so they don't get back in the classroom and go, okay, that was great learning, now what? We go, okay, share, give feedback, and then you can keep that loop going. So how I've done this, I'll give you an example of my program called Deus Ex Machina. So this is one that I kind of made after my thoughts around design thinking and what that might look like. So we start by exploring Taonga, our nature exhibit here, which is beautiful. We look at our endemic species, and we also look at what endangers them. So we've got all these things in the sea, but actually we also have issues with pollution in the sea. We also have issues with, you know, there's forestry, there's lots of different types of pollution, and then forestry affects birds as well. We can look at introduced predators and the ways that we are trying to, where they come from, but then also the ways that we're trying to curb those. And around here, we have students go, oh yeah, I've got possum traps in my backyard and stuff like that, which I'm sure some of you have as well. So it becomes that local community context already because I can say, okay, well, tell me about the possum traps. So that's really cool. Then we'll go and look at that for about 45 minutes, I would say. Yep, 30, 45 minutes. Takes a little while to get from level 2 to level 4 in our museum as well. So I've got to add that in. So once we get back to the classroom, we will define what those problems were because that's where we're going. Those are what we want to solve. So we'll say, okay, we talked about forestry. We talked about introduce predators, and we'll put them up, and then I'll get the students to pick the problem that they resonate with the most, or that seems the most interesting, or some of them already have ideas brewing. Okay, so that's great. What are you solving? And so they'll pick those ones so that I can then look back and go, that's really great. You're solving this problem, this problem. Okay, cool. Then we ideate, and we ideate by using blue sky thinking. I say to them, if you had all the money, all the time, and all the knowledge, what would you build to either make this problem smaller or eradicate it completely? And that will be, we have whiteboard tables, but it could just be done on paper or whatever, 5 minutes to do a quick, real sketch. And we really make it tight as well, so that they don't double think themselves. They don't go, oh, maybe, I could do this, I could do that. We want them to just sketch it out, think about, maybe do a couple. What I will usually do is I usually like to look at rubbish in the ocean, because as most of you will know, Te Papa's right next to a big ocean, big walkway, lots of water, and lots of people throw stuff in the harbour. They throw a lot of rubbish in the harbour. So what I will do is I'll quickly mock up a machine that's usually square and has long suckers that go down into the ocean, and they suck up all the rubbish and they put it into 3 bins within there, 1 for glass, 1 for metal, and 1 for plastic. And then once that's full, it then docks, and the recycling truck comes in and takes it all away, and then it floats back out again. And that's all I'll do. So once they've had those 5 minutes, it's time for them to start prototyping. So we usually like to use digital tools. Now, if anybody is following along, you should be able to click on these 2 pictures, and they will take you, I'm just sharing this tab, so I might not go out of here just in case. But they will take you to the actual 3D models that these students have built using Tinkercad, which is a free 3D model design. We'll give them a quick kind of go on that, and then they're able to build these. But they could also draw it if they wanted to. If we had some time and we had recycled materials, they could build it. It's completely up to them, whatever works best. We really like it if we have a student come into us and say, I'm just not a computer person, that they get the opportunity to do it the way that they want. But then we also give the opportunity for those that are. So this is the whole thing around them being able to tackle it in the way that they want. So they do end up with things like this. And you're probably looking at them going, what is that? I'm going to be honest, I can't remember what they were. But if you click on it, you will be able to, and you'll also see these little dots. And when you click on those are actually annotations where the students have written what each of these parts are in their models. Because of the software that we're using, sometimes it's not clear, but we say to the students, if you were going to give this to someone who was going to fund it to you and you couldn't be there to explain it, what are some annotations? So they'll put little annotations, which can be done through Tinkercad or through the other program we've used to show these, so that they can give you more of an idea of what each part does and everything like that. Then testing, we try and get, if we're at the end, we get people to come back in, and I'll get them to critique my machine that I made. Often I'll get lots of things like, well, what if it sucked up a fish? Good point. So I need to think of some kind of contraption that I can make at the bottom of the sucker that will not let fish in, but let everything else in. I get other things going, well, how is it powered? Because if it's petrol powered, then you're pretty much completely dismissing the whole point in it. Oh, right, well, I need solar power panels on it. All these different things that we can think of. Maybe, well, the plastic goes into the machine and the glass and the metal, maybe it actually melts down to give more space within there. There's heaps of different things. And then I'll encourage the students to get that type of feedback as well from their peers on theirs, and then make some more. And then that can just keep going throughout the lesson. Like I said, if we get time at the end to share, cool. If not, they can just keep that iterative process going throughout school and beyond. And that's how we would kind of do it in 2 hours. So one of the big main things that I really want to hit home about design thinking and problem-based learning is that much of the things in our museums and galleries are a reaction to people by asking questions about life and then reacting. So we really want to get to the point that we are solving problems and answering questions. There's no point in us just talking about something. We should never be able to have a student come to us and go, why do I need to know this? Well, you need to know this because we're going to be answering this question. We're going to be building this. And if you don't know what type of rubbish is in the ocean, how are you going to build a machine to get rid of it? So it's that idea that everything they're doing for a reason. They're solving problems, they're answering questions, and they get to kind of do it in their own way, which is really, really cool. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, we have time, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I breezed through that. So I'm going to give you guys an opportunity now to ask some questions. And then those of you who are sticking around for the breakout sessions, we're going to break out into some smaller groups and have a chat with some other people from some other galleries about how they might use design thinking and problem-based learning within their learning. Then we're going to come back, and any questions that have emerged from those breakout sessions, you can have a go at asking me again, and then after that, we can go. So I'm taking some questions now.
Natalie Harbert has raised her hand.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Go for it, Natalie.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Thank you. That was really good. Personally, I've just recently come out of teaching as well, so I was quite familiar with this process. Cool. It's cool to see how it could be used in a museum context. I guess my question is around, I suppose this would be great if you've got the schools that are coming in and wanting you to help set off their inquiry process to spark questions or have it around a theme. But quite often we get schools coming in that are already partway through their inquiry process or finishing off. And with younger students, I think, and in mixed classrooms, sometimes the inquiry process is kind of a busy work project that teachers get younger students to do. Mm-hmm. So I guess, do you have any experience with classes coming in further through the inquiry process, or engaging with them later on, and what that would look like?
Yeah, definitely. I think we've had them come in the whole way through, and I think there's really a lot of conversation in there about with the teacher about why are you bringing them into the museum, essentially? Because if we think about that that idea, like you said, this is really good right at the beginning, but I mean, so is a lot of inquiry stuff. A lot of museum stuff. We really want teachers to stop kind of seeing us as that fun field trip at the end of the unit, because it's quite, related to what we're doing, and actually seeing us as the resource that we are, and as the, as something that would be good right at the beginning, but also why are we coming in? What is this adding to the classroom? That's what we can talk about, because depending on where they are within there is a way that we could put this tiny little inquiry approach in there. So it could be that they've been doing rivers for ages and they've talked about the water cycle and they've talked about the fish, but they actually want to come into us to talk about the dangers, the things that are endangering our rivers. And so that's where we can do our inquiry. So I would say having a chat with the teacher, finding out why they're coming in, and really trying to say, look, we're looking to answer some questions. What are some of the questions that you guys are asking when coming to the museum? What are you saying? Oh, we're going to go and look at this and we're going to go and look at that. Does that kind of answer your question?
That's really good. Thank you.
Awesome.
And I guess it's up to us as well to have that as a kind of outreach thing, or something that's more advertised, I guess, for all museums. I think someone put in the chats just then, what else we can offer, and trying to make it a point to start off your topic with a bang.
Definitely. I mean, it's so exciting. Like I said, that we can offer this massive context. It's well, if you're doing that, why not start with us, get that bang, get that hook, and then go from there. And as educators, we can show you a couple of cool ways to go from here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a question from Sam. Oh, I lost it. Hi, Jessie. That was a really interesting example of a program. How long does that program take all up?
It takes 2 hours. So Deus Ex Machina takes 2 hours. We spend about 30 to 45 minutes out on the floor, and then whatever time we have left and as far as we can get. And it changes how far we get within the design process depending on the age group of the students. If they're a little bit older, we can get into maybe 1 or 2 cycles of that iteration. But if they're a little bit younger, or maybe they haven't used some of the digital tools before, but the teacher's really keen on them learning that, sometimes we can just get to just building the prototype and labeling it. But we're still talking to the teachers saying, okay, this is the next thing we would do if you want to carry this on or not. But they still get a really good idea.
We have a semi-follow-up from Kirsty Porter. Hi, Jessie. In your experience, how much time do you normally allow to get something designed in Tinkercad?
I think it would depend on the age group of the students. It would depend on how much experience they've already had in Tinkercad. And then it would depend on a quick kind of, sometimes students can come and go, yeah, I really know Tinkercad. And we're like, oh, okay, so show me how you do this. No idea. So it's a quick kind of evaluation for us. We have got it down to an art where we can explain it in about 5 minutes. And I think we usually give the students about 20 minutes to design something in there. Again, we probably don't use Tinkercad. We would use Tinkercad from about year 3 to year 4. We find that the dexterity of students below that, they really tend to struggle. With them, we might use paper or building it with plasticine or craft stuff or anything like that. Completely kind of depends on the student. But yeah, roughly 20 minutes, I would say.
Okay, Jessie. There's one more.
Oh, yeah.
Karen Carr. What size groups have you had them working together?
We usually like to use partners. That's probably the best. I find that maybe a 3, but anything higher than that, they start to fight. So pairs is usually the best, and we have class groups of about 30. So we'll usually have about 15 groups. Great.
Awesome. Oh, Barbara Brown's got her hand up.
Yes, Barbara.
Hi, Jessie. I'm at a smaller museum up in Kaikohe, and at the moment, one of our challenges is to let schools know that we can design a program. Cool. So I know you're bigger and you have more resources, but with a school to come and do what you've just said, are you letting the schools know that we have this available, or are you saying, let us know and we'll design it? Like, what angle are you taking?
A little bit of both. So Deus Ex Machina is an option on our website along with all our other programs. And it does outline that we use the design process and this is what we go through. But sometimes if we have a teacher come to us, sometimes they'll go, oh, we really want to come to you, but this is our program and we're not quite or this is what we're learning about, but we're not quite sure which program it fits into. If we decide that a bespoke program is best for that because we don't have, maybe it's something a little bit, we don't have a program on it, or it's a little bit out of there, but we still have things that we could do in the museum with it, and it ends up being a bit of a bespoke program. We might use this as a really good template to kind of fit into what they're doing. I guess it would depend. So yeah, it's a little bit of both. We have the stock standard Deus Ex Machina that looks at the dangers to nature and our environment, but then it can be used. We have it kind of in the back of our minds as educators as a way that we could look at a topic that maybe we don't have a program on.
And so you're putting up this these changing topics and changing programs on your website. Is that how teachers are finding out what's available?
Yes. They either inquire through our website, or they will, sometimes they contact us directly if it's a teacher that we know, but they still have to book everything through our website. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome.
Great.
Thanks, Jessie. They were really great questions.
They were.
Yeah.
It's good.
So let's break into discussion groups just for 5 minutes. So it's only a very brief moment in time.
Switching to you. Here we go.
Oh, yeah. Hello again. So what we're going to do is Mal, our administrator, is just going to put people into small discussion groups. So you're going to find yourself leaving the screen, and in a moment when I finish talking, you'll be in a new little group with a few other people. And you can just have 5 minutes to introduce yourself to each other and just reflect on Jessie's presentation and think about how you might be able to use it in your context. And then we'll come back to myself and Jessie, and we'll just have an opportunity if you want to share something from your group, what was discussed, and then I'll close off. I'll tell you about the next webinar coming up, and I'll close off our hui with a karakia. And I hope it actually gave you a chance to have a little mini conversation with each other. Is there anyone from any of the groups who's willing to actually share now, back in the big group, about what was said in their breakout discussions?
One of the things that Sam was just talking about before we finished, and that we sort of talked about, was that maybe doing it at the end of the children come with their ideas already. So I was saying that I thought one of our topics of early Maori food gathering, which is really important for our area, we often talk about how they preserved food, but you could, and we often get groups that come at the start for their ignition. So you could actually get them to think. You could send some questions out and get them to think in the class beforehand. How would Maori have stored their food if they had no refrigeration? And then they could come with those ideas. So a little bit of the pre-thinking happens there. Yeah, and then we also talked about maybe sending them back to school to do the other bits. We're a bit limited on time sometimes.
Yeah, I will just add with that. It's something we're trying at my current in my current role. So with we're a Lego based education charity in Christchurch, and we I have to admit, we do often find that we'll send out some sort of pre-visit resources around the design thinking process, and so it will outline like a design brief, and it will outline sort of like some things that we'd like them to do. For example, we have a program around building chairs, and we hope that they will sort of do some research around some brainstorming around what makes a chair comfortable, and do some research around sort of what makes a chair look really cool, and then maybe cut out some magazine pictures or something. And then the idea is that they come with that sort of armed with that knowledge about how chairs work and are designed, and then they would build them with us. And I have to say the uptake on that is not great. Like, it's not ideal. We quite often get them coming in and going, yeah, we've talked to zero times about chairs. We meant to do that, and we haven't done that. So you've got 60 minutes and go. And we're like, oh, okay. So we're doing the entire design process in an hour. But yeah, I think we also talked about running it where we just do the first part of that design process, so up to Ideate or maybe very early prototyping, and I think that can be really successful in a shorter period of time. But I was wondering how you guys find the attention span for 2 hours, because definitely all the places I've worked, like 90 minutes is definitely the longest of the classes that we run. But maybe do you find that when you're changing sort of like styles of learning with your exploration and Te Taio and your classroom based, do they cope with that? Is that fine? Do they need a lunch break in the middle?
They would want more if they could. It's, I think, really changing it up and giving those small time frames of, okay, you've got 5 minutes, here's a whiteboard pen, go. And then going out into the museum and coming back, and the designing and everything. We don't give them time to think. It happens really, really fast because, we've only got 2 hours, but because it goes so fast, we're able to model it really quickly, and teachers understand really quickly how they could then slow that process down and have it happen over multiple times, over multiple days or weeks or whatever in their classroom. But that quick fire, bam, 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 they're coming down to the mat, they're looking at something, they're getting up, they're going over to their room. Okay, 5 minutes is up. They're coming back, they're going down, keeping it quick, keeping it snappy, so that we can keep to time frames, but also so they don't think about anything else but what they're doing, it really, really keeps them engaged. We could go for ages, but they do need to eat.
Essential.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, thanks,
Cool.
Sam.
Yeah, thank you guys. That was
And
really
thank you, Keely.
Anyone else want to feedback things that were talked about in their little discussion groups?
Questions, ideas? Monica?
Was really interesting. We could have talked for much longer, but we started thinking about the way of how this applies in a historic and heritage place. What kind of communication it requires with the teachers beforehand, and how we would be able to use those kind of questions to solve as the hook in. Why do the kids need to learn about history? So what, why does it matter? And it would be cool to actually discuss this quite a bit more, specifically for the historic aspect and the heritage aspect, where kids go like, old stuff. Why do I need to know about this? So could we go into there? Why do you need to know about this? Why does it matter? And I think what Keely was saying earlier about the early Maori food gathering, and that links into that. So I think all of us could learn a lot from each other, and by applying questions like that, man, couldn't we change some of those views of how to interact with some of our exhibits on Taonga and the exhibitions?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking that with what Kelly was talking about as well, well, why did they have to preserve? What did they do? What do we do now to preserve things? If we had all the time, money, and everything in the world, how might we make food live forever? And, and in a unit plan in a classroom, I could see how you would look into some of those preservatives. You could look at goods and bads about them, and what made early Māori so good was that it didn't have the chemicals. It was, they had these incredible ways of thinking about those kind of things. And, you can really lengthen them and get them to put them in that place and go, okay, but if you're going into winter and you need to preserve these things, what are we going to do about our food? Are we just going to not? And yeah, getting them to sit in that place, you're right, sit in the shoes of who was making those decisions at the time and why they made them. And if we were faced with that same decision today, what might we do about it? Can be really, really powerful in their learning and their connections that they make, and connecting with our history. Like you said, it's not just going, oh yeah, so that happened. They can go, that happened. This is why they made that choice. If that happened now, we'd make these choices. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
Awesome. I'm really happy that we managed to have a little breakout discussion, and I'm really pleased to hear all the questions that we've had in response to your presentation today. I think it sparked lots of ideas for people about how they might be able to change up or adapt their programs, or different ways of working in with teachers and what they're doing in classrooms. So thank you, Jessie. It's been a fantastic talk. Before we have our closing karakia, I just want to tell you about our next webinar that we've got coming up. Thank you, Mel. She's showing you.
Thank you, Mel.
So in 2 weeks' time, on Thursday, the 14th of October, we've got the lovely Laura Jones, who is another fantastic educator here at Te Papa, and she'll be introducing another pedagogical approach that might be useful for us to use in our context outside the classroom, which is visual thinking strategies. So I'm really looking forward to seeing you lots back here again in a couple of weeks' time to learn from Laura. And thank you for coming today. Monica and I are busy in the process of planning our upcoming webinars, the different themes and topics that we're going to be covering, and looking at developing our online course for you. And we're using the survey results that we've gathered to base our planning on. We have had about 70 respondents to that survey, but we've got nearly 200 members in our association. So in order to build on those survey results and to find out a bit more about what people might find useful in terms of our PLD that we're able to give, we've decided to hold a few regional focus group discussions over the next couple of weeks using this Google chat function. So look out for an invitation that will be coming to you shortly from us to join a regional smaller group discussion about sharing some more ideas with us about what your needs are in terms of training and professional development. So I'm looking forward to meeting you again in some of those meetings.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Is that quickly? I just want to add, because I saw that one in there as well. At the end of my slides, if you manage to grab them, there is a whole heap of resources on what I've been talking about. There's a unit plan that I've made around design thinking and stuff like that. So anything that you want to look at, use some of those resources. They might help you out a bit more. And I'm also really open to any emails from anybody. My email is at the end of those slides. Please, any questions, any comments, any ideas, I'm always open to hearing from people, especially with school holidays coming up. I'm happy to answer any questions or have any chats with anybody.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so I think we're ready to close off and say goodbye to everybody. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapu nui, kia wātia, kia māma, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua i te ara takata, koia rā e rongo, whakairia ake ki runga, kia tina, tina,
Tina.
huie,
Tai
tai
hie.
hie. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.